Have you ever wondered what it would be like to drift through the hazy, smoke-filled corridors of old Shanghai's most notorious establishments? Tonight, we're stepping back in time, exploring a world that existed in the shadows of one of history's greatest cities. Here, sweet smoke curled through dimly lit rooms, and time itself seemed to stand still. Welcome to the opium dens of late 19th century Shanghai, where merchants and laborers, sailors and scholars all sought the same ethereal escape from the harsh realities of colonial life. This isn't just another history lesson about addiction and vice. Instead, we're taking a slow, contemplative journey through these forgotten spaces. We'll meet the people who inhabited them and understand the complex web of circumstances that made these dens the beating heart of Shanghai's underworld. Picture yourself walking down Nanking Road as the sun dips below the Hangpu River. The sounds of rickshaw wheels on cobblestones fade behind you as you duck into a narrow alley, barely wide enough for two people to pass. The scent of cooking oil and incense mingles with something else, something sweet and cloying that pulls you deeper into a maze of buildings leaning against each other, like old friends sharing secrets. You approach a door marked only by a small red lantern hanging from an iron bracket. There's no sign, no hint of what lies beyond, but the doorman recognizes something in your eyes and gives an almost imperceptible nod. The heavy wooden door creaks open, revealing a world entirely separate from the colonial bustle outside. The first thing that strikes you is the warmth. Not just the physical heat from bodies and burning lamps, but something deeper, more enveloping. The walls are lined with dark wood panels, intricately carved with dragons and phoenixes that seem to undulate in the flickering lamplight. The ceiling is low, creating an intimate atmosphere that makes even strangers feel like conspirators in some grand shared secret. This particular establishment, known to its patrons simply as the Jade Garden, represented the pinnacle of opium den luxury. In 1880s Shanghai, unlike the cramped, squalid smoking rooms serving the city's poorest addicts, places like the Jade Garden catered to merchants, foreign businessmen, and even the occasional Chinese official seeking refuge from the pressures of their position. Main reception area features a series of low tables surrounded by silk cushions in deep reds and golds. Here, newcomers could sip tea and discuss business, or simply observe the comings and goings of other patrons. The air is thick, not just with opium smoke, but with the murmur of conversations in half a dozen languages. Mandarin mingles with English. Portuguese sailors argue with German traders. And through it all, the staff moves silently, anticipating needs before they're even expressed. Behind the reception area, a narrow corridor leads deeper into the building. The walls here are adorned with scroll paintings depicting misty mountain landscapes and ancient poets lost in contemplation. Small alcoves hold bronze incense burners, their smoke adding another layer to the complex aromatics that define these spaces. The smoking rooms themselves are arranged along this corridor, each meticulously designed to accommodate different types of patrons and their varying needs for privacy or companionship. The first room you encounter is the communal chamber, where wooden platforms covered in thin mattresses and silk pillows can hold perhaps 20 people at once. Here, the atmosphere is almost social. Men recline on their sides, some propped on elbows, others lying flat with their eyes closed in peaceful contemplation. Conversations are desultory, meandering, touched with the peculiar intimacy that comes when strangers share a profound experience. A British merchant discusses the fluctuating price of tea with a Chinese banker, their words coming slowly, thoughtfully, as if each syllable carries unusual weight. On one platform, a young Chinese man, perhaps a clerk or minor official, lies perfectly still. His breathing is so slow and regular, it seems almost meditative. His clothes are simple but clean, suggesting someone who works hard for his money, yet considers this expense worthwhile. His eyes are open, but focused on something far beyond. The carved wooden ceiling, perhaps seeing landscapes that exist only in the realm created by the sweet smoke curling around his head like a gentle spirit. Beside him, an older man with the weathered hands of a dock worker holds an opium pipe with the careful reverence of someone performing a sacred ritual. His movements are deliberate, practiced as he prepares another portion of the dark, sticky substance that will transport him away from the aching joints and endless labor defining his daylight hours. The pipe itself is a work of art, nearly 2 feet long, with a bamboo stem and an ornate ceramic bowl decorated with tiny blue flowers. The process of preparing and smoking opium is deliberate, almost ceremonial. First, a small portion of the prepared opium is rolled into a pill between the thumb and forefinger. This pill is then inserted into the pipe bowl and held over a small oil lamp until it begins to bubble and vaporize. The smoker then inhales deeply, holding the precious vapor in his lungs for as long as possible before exhaling slowly through pursed lips. The entire process takes several minutes, creating a natural rhythm that prevents hasty consumption and encourage the contemplative mood defining the opium experience. Moving deeper into the establishment, we find the semi-private chambers smaller, rooms accommodating 4 to 6 people at most. These spaces are favored by groups of friends or business associates who wish to combine their smoking with more intimate conversation or negotiation. In one such chamber, 3 Portuguese merchants are conducting what appears to be a business discussion, though their words come with the languid pace characteristic of opium users. They're arranged on low couches surrounding a small table holding not just their pipes and lamps, but also ledger books and samples of silk fabric. This mixing of business and pleasure was common in Shanghai's opium culture, where many deals were struck in the relaxed atmosphere of the smoking rooms. The youngest of the 3, perhaps in his early 30s, gestures slowly with his pipe as he explains some complex point about shipping schedules. His companions nod thoughtfully, their responses coming after long pauses that, in any other context, might seem awkward, but here feel perfectly natural, as if the conversation itself has been slowed to match the peaceful rhythm of their breathing. Adjacent to this chamber, we find a scene of pure solitude. A single man, well dressed in the manner of a successful Chinese merchant, lies alone on a platform that could easily accommodate 4 people. His isolation is clearly intentional, purchased at premium rates for the privilege of experiencing his opium dreams without intrusion from strangers. This gentleman, whom we might call Mr. Chen, represents a significant portion of Shanghai's opium clientele, successful in business but trapped by the social expectations and family obligations that come with his position. He finds in these sessions a rare opportunity for complete solitude and introspection. His clothes are silk, his hands soft, suggesting a life of comfort. Yet his expression carries a melancholy that speaks to the complex emotional landscape driving many to seek opium's embrace. Mr. Chen's ritual is unhurried, almost meditative. He prepares each pipe with the careful attention of a tea master, taking time to appreciate not just the effect, but the entire sensory experience. The warm glow of the lamp on his face, the weight of the pipe in his hands, the gradual transition from the concerns of daily life to a state of peaceful detachment from worldly worries. The most exclusive area of the Jade Garden requires climbing a narrow staircase to the 2nd floor, where private suites cater to Shanghai's most demanding clientele. These rooms are furnished more like bedchambers than smoking areas, with proper beds covered in imported European linens, carved wooden screens for privacy, and windows that can be opened to let in the night air from the river. Here, a different class of patron seeks not just the opium experience, but complete escape from their public identities. Foreign diplomats, wealthy Chinese officials, and successful European businessmen pay handsomely for the assurance that their presence will remain completely confidential. In one such suite, a man who might be a British consul lies on a canopied bed, his formal dress carefully hung on a wooden ballet stand. His transformation from public official to private individual, seeking pharmaceutical solace, represents one of the most complex aspects of Shanghai's opium culture. These were not merely pleasure seekers or escapists, but often intelligent, successful people caught between the demands of their positions and their very human need for relief from constant pressure and responsibility. The opium itself arrives in these exclusive suites already prepared by skilled attendants who understand that discretion and quality are paramount. The pipes used here are often personal items, sometimes family heirlooms or gifts from grateful business partners, crafted from precious materials and decorated with personal symbols or inscriptions. As our British consul inhales his carefully prepared dose, his entire posture subtly changes. The rigid bearing required by his position melts away, replaced by something more fundamentally human. His breathing becomes deeper, more natural, and for perhaps the first time in months, the lines of worry around his eyes begin to soften. This transformation illustrates one of the most fascinating aspects of opium den culture in old Shanghai. These establishments served as great equalizers, where the artificial hierarchies of colonial society temporarily dissolved. A Chinese merchant and a British trader who might treat each other with formal politeness or even suspicion in their daytime encounters could find themselves sharing profound conversations about life, loss, and the search for meaning that transcends cultural boundaries. The staff of establishments like the Jade Garden were carefully selected not just for their discretion, but for their ability to read the subtle needs of their diverse clientele. The head attendant, an elderly Chinese man known to patrons simply as Lao Wang, moves through the rooms like a gentle spirit, appearing when needed and vanishing when privacy is preferred. Lao Wang has worked in opium establishments for over 20 years, and his understanding of human nature has been refined by countless encounters with people in their most vulnerable states. He knows which patrons prefer complete solitude, which enjoy quiet conversation, and which need gentle encouragement to prevent them from consuming dangerous amounts of the drug. His movements through the establishment follow patterns developed over decades of experience. He checks on the communal chambers every half hour, ensuring that lamps remain lit and that no patron has fallen into a state requiring medical attention. His visits to the private suites are announced by the soft sound of his cloth shoes on wooden floors, giving occupants the opportunity to indicate whether his services are needed. The relationship between attendants like Lao Wang and regular patrons often develops into something resembling friendship, though always bounded by the commercial nature of their interaction. Many regular visitors confide in these attendants, sharing personal struggles and seeking advice that they might not feel comfortable requesting from family members or business associates. Through Lao Wang's eyes, we begin to understand that the opium dens of Shanghai were not simply places of vice and addiction, but complex social institutions that served multiple functions in a rapidly changing society. They provided not just pharmaceutical relief, but also spaces for cross-cultural interaction, business networking, and the kind of honest human conversation that was often impossible in the formal structures of colonial Shanghai. In the corner of the communal chamber, a figure catches our attention through the gentle haze that perpetually fills these spaces. She is perhaps 40 years old, dressed in the simple but clean clothing of a merchant's wife. Though the absence of jewelry suggests either personal preference or economic necessity, her name, we learn from whispered conversations, is Mrs. Li. And her story represents one of the more complex narratives that unfold within these walls. Mrs. Lee began visiting the Jade Garden not for recreation or business networking, but as a response to chronic pain that had plagued her for years following a difficult childbirth. In an era when medical options for women were severely limited, especially for conditions that physicians dismissed as feminine weakness, opium offered the only reliable relief from suffering that had begun to define her entire existence. Her technique with the pipe reveals the careful economy of someone who must make each visit count. She measures her portions with the precision of an apothecary, understanding that too little will leave her pain unaddressed, while too much will render her incapable of fulfilling her domestic responsibilities upon returning home. Her husband, a rice merchant who works in the foreign quarter, remains unaware of these visits, believing instead that his wife's improved disposition stems from treatments provided by a traditional Chinese doctor. The complexity of Mrs. Lee's situation illuminates the broader role that opium dens played in addressing not just the recreational desires of their patrons, but genuine medical needs in a society where professional health care was often inadequate or entirely unavailable to certain populations. Many women unable to access proper medical treatment due to social conventions or economic limitations found in these establishments their only refuge from physical and emotional suffering. Across the room from Mrs. Lee, a young man barely out of his teens demonstrates the tragic trajectory that brought many to these chambers, not by choice, but by circumstance. Jin, as he introduces himself to anyone willing to listen, first encountered opium during his employment at a foreign trading house, where the drug was as common as tea and facilitating business relationships with international clients. What began as occasional participation in business-related smoking sessions gradually evolved into a daily necessity as Jin discovered that opium provided relief not just from physical discomfort but from the psychological weight of serving as a cultural intermediary between Chinese traditions and foreign business practices. The constant translation required was not merely linguistic but cultural, emotional, and moral, creating stresses that seemed to find their only outlet in the peaceful detachment that opium provided. Jin's story reflects a broader pattern among young Chinese men employed by foreign firms during this period. Caught between traditional family expectations and the demands of modernizing commerce, many found themselves psychologically displaced persons in their own city. The opium dens offered not just pharmaceutical relief, but a temporary escape from the impossible task of reconciling irreconcilable worldviews. His presence in the communal chamber rather than a private room reflects both his economic circumstances and his desire for human connection. Unlike the merchants and officials who could afford solitude, Jin seeks the comfort of shared experience, finding in the quiet conversations and mutual understanding of his fellow patrons a substitute for the family and community connections that his work schedule and changing lifestyle have made increasingly difficult to maintain. The progression of evening activities in establishments like the Jade Garden follows patterns as predictable as tides. Yet each night brings variations that reflect the human dramas playing out within these walls. As the hours advance toward midnight, the character of conversations shifts from business discussions and social pleasantries toward more introspective topics that emerge only when the drug's effects create the psychological safety necessary for genuine vulnerability. In the semi-private chambers, we observe this transformation as 3 German sailors who entered the establishment, discussing cargo schedules and port conditions, gradually find themselves sharing stories of childhood, memories, and lost loves. The opium has not rendered them incoherent, but rather has removed the social barriers that normally prevent such intimate exchanges between strangers. The eldest of the 3, a man whose weathered face speaks of decades spent battling ocean. Storms describes in halting English mixed with fragments of German the small Bavarian village he left 30 years ago to seek his fortune at sea. His voice carries the particular melancholy that comes when opium strips away the protective narratives we construct around our life choices, revealing both the costs and benefits of paths taken and abandoned. His companions listen with the intense attention that characterizes opium-influenced conversation, where each word seems to carry unusual weight and meaning. The usual hurry of daily discourse has been replaced by a pace that allows for genuine consideration of what is being shared. Questions, when they come, are thoughtful rather than perfunctory, creating exchanges that approximate the kind of meaningful dialogue that many people experience only rarely in their ordinary lives. This transformation of casual acquaintances into temporary confidants represents one of the most significant social functions of Shanghai's opium establishments. In a city where most relationships were defined by commercial necessity or colonial hierarchy, these spaces provided rare opportunities for interactions based on shared humanity rather than economic or political advantage. The physical environment of these chambers contributes significantly to these psychological transformations. The low lighting created by oil lamps and the gentle haze of opium smoke soften the sharp edges of individual features, making everyone appear slightly ethereal, less defined by the harsh realities of their daytime identities. The comfortable cushions and low tables encourage relaxed postures that mirror the mental relaxation produced by the drug, creating a feedback loop between physical and psychological comfort. As we move through the establishment's various chambers, the diversity of languages being spoken provides a constant reminder of Shanghai's role as an international crossroads. In one corner, a conversation proceeds in Portuguese between two men whose animated gestures suggest business disagreement, though their voices remain calm and their pace unhurried. Nearby, a mixture of English and Mandarin creates a hybrid dialogue. As a British merchant attempts to understand the philosophical observations of a Chinese scholar, these linguistic minglings represent more than mere convenience or necessity. They reflect the unique cultural space that opium dens occupied in colonial Shanghai, where the normal rules governing interaction between different ethnic and social groups were temporarily suspended. The shared experience of opium consumption created a common ground that transcended the usual barriers of language, culture, and colonial power dynamics. The Chinese scholar engaged in conversation with the British merchant presents a particularly poignant example of these cross-cultural encounters. Educated in classical literature and philosophy, but forced by economic circumstances to seek employment with foreign firms, he represents the intellectual displacement experienced by many traditional Chinese scholars during this period of rapid social change. His observations about the nature of time and memory, delivered in careful English, punctuated by classical Chinese quotations that his British companion cannot understand, reveal the isolation experienced by educated Chinese individuals caught between traditional knowledge systems and modern commercial realities. The opium provides temporary relief from this cultural displacement, while the international environment of the den offers rare opportunities to share his intellectual heritage with foreigners who, in their altered states, are more receptive to ideas that would normally seem incomprehensible or irrelevant. The British merchant, for his part, finds himself unusually moved by concepts that would typically strike him as Oriental mysticism unsuited to practical men of commerce. The opium has temporarily suspended his cultural prejudices, allowing him to appreciate the profound observations of his Chinese companion without the filter of colonial superiority that normally shapes such encounters. Their conversation touches on themes of loss and adaptation that resonate across cultural boundaries. The scholar speaks of watching ancient traditions disappear as Shanghai transforms itself to accommodate foreign influence, while the merchant describes his own sense of displacement thousands of miles from everything familiar, pursuing profits in a land whose customs and values remain largely mysterious to him. These exchanges illustrate how opium dens functioned as inadvertent spaces for cultural diplomacy, where individuals from different backgrounds could encounter each other as human beings rather than representatives of competing civilizations. The drug's ability to reduce anxiety and increase empathy created conditions where genuine understanding between cultures became possible, even if only temporarily. The establishment's upper floors reveal even more complex social dynamics, as we encounter patrons whose public positions require absolute discretion regarding their presence in such establishments. In one private suite, a man whose expensive clothing and careful grooming suggests high social standing lies in contemplative silence, his opium pipe resting on a side table while he stares at the ceiling with an expression of profound sadness. This gentleman, whom we might call Commissioner Zhang, holds a position in the Chinese imperial administration that requires him to publicly oppose the opium trade while privately struggling with his own dependence on the drug. His situation represents one of the most tragic contradictions of this historical period, where many officials charged with enforcing anti-opium policies had themselves become dependent on the substance they were supposed to eliminate. Commissioner Zhang's evening ritual involves not just the consumption of opium, but a complex process of psychological preparation for returning to his public role. The drug provides temporary relief from the moral compromise required by his position, but each session also deepens his sense of personal corruption and professional failure. His presence in this exclusive suite reflects both his economic ability to afford privacy and his desperate need to avoid recognition by other patrons who might use knowledge of his addiction for political advantage. The isolation he purchases comes at a premium, but the alternative exposure could mean not just personal disgrace, but potential execution under imperial laws that he himself helps to enforce. The attendants who serve these upper-level suites understand the particular vulnerabilities of their clientele and maintain standards of discretion that approach the sacred. Their silence is purchased not just with money, but with mutual understanding of the catastrophic consequences that would follow any breach of confidence. The conversations that drift through these exclusive suites carry a different weight than those heard in the communal chambers below. Here, words emerge slowly, carefully considered, as if each syllable might be the speaker's last opportunity to express thoughts that have remained buried beneath layers of public responsibility and social expectation. In the suite adjacent to Commissioner Zhang, we encounter a scene that reveals the international scope of Shanghai's opium culture. A French diplomat, his formal jacket draped carefully over a chair, engages in halting conversation with a wealthy Chinese tea merchant. Their exchange, conducted in a mixture of broken English and gestures, centers on philosophical questions that would seem absurd in any other context, but here take on profound significance. The Frenchman speaks of his childhood in Normandy, describing apple orchards that existed only in memory since his family's estate was sold to fund his education and diplomatic career. His words come with the particular precision that opium brings to recollection, where distant memories acquire startling clarity, while recent events fade into pleasant irrelevance. The tea merchant responds with his own childhood memories, painting verbal pictures of mountain villages where his grandfather taught him to distinguish between different grades of tea leaves by touch alone. The opium has stripped away the commercial calculations that normally govern his thoughts, allowing him to speak of tea not as commodity, but as a connection to ancestral wisdom and vanishing traditions. Their conversation illustrates how opium's effects on memory create a unique form of time travel, where past experiences become more vivid and emotionally accessible than present circumstances. This psychological phenomenon explains much of the drug's appeal to individuals whose current lives feel disconnected from their authentic selves or meaningful personal history. The physical act of smoking in these private suites follows rituals that have been refined through countless repetitions. Each patron has developed personal techniques that maximize both the pharmaceutical effects and the meditative aspects of consumption. The French diplomat, for instance, has learned to coordinate his breathing with the rhythm of preparation, creating a seamless flow from ordinary consciousness to the altered state he seeks. His pipe, acquired during his first diplomatic posting in Indochina, bears carved symbols that remind him of a time when his career seemed to promise adventure and meaningful service to his nation. Now serving in Shanghai's complex political environment, he finds that same pipe offers his only reliable escape from the moral compromises required by imperial diplomacy. In a city where every decision carries consequences for thousands of lives, the tea merchant's approach to opium consumption reflects his professional understanding of quality and preparation. He examines each portion of the drug with the same careful attention he applies to evaluating tea leaves, understanding that inferior opium produces not just less satisfactory effects, but potentially dangerous impurities that could compromise his health or judgment. His movements with the pipe demonstrate the unconscious grace that comes from years of practice, each gesture economical and purposeful. The lamp flame dances as he heats the opium to precisely the right temperature, neither too hot nor too cool, achieving the optimal balance that transforms the raw substance into vapor that carries both pharmaceutical relief and spiritual transcendence. As midnight approaches, the character of the establishment shifts subtly. New patrons arrive seeking refuge from evening business obligations or family responsibilities, while others prepare for the gradual return to ordinary consciousness that will allow them to resume their daytime identities. In the communal chamber, Mrs. Lee begins the careful process of gauging whether she has achieved sufficient relief to last through the coming day without consuming so much that her altered state will be detectable to family members. Her calculations involve not just pharmaceutical considerations, but complex assessments of social performance, domestic responsibilities, and the financial impact of each visit. Her departure ritual involves several minutes of quiet observation, testing her coordination and mental clarity before venturing back into the streets of Shanghai. The transition from the warm, protective atmosphere of the den to the harsh realities of colonial society requires careful management, particularly for women whose presence in such establishments carries additional social risks. The young man, Jin, faces different challenges as he prepares to leave. His employment requires early morning presence at the trading house, where any sign of impairment could result in immediate dismissal and potential blacklisting from other foreign firms. His consumption must be precisely calibrated to provide relief from psychological distress without compromising his professional performance. The skills required for this balancing act represent a form of expertise that many regular patrons developed over months or years of careful experimentation. Understanding one's own tolerance, recognizing the signs of approaching impairment, and managing the timing of consumption to avoid conflicts with social or professional obligations became essential survival skills in a society that simultaneously tolerated and condemned opium use. The attendant, Lao Wang, observes these departure preparations with the practiced eye of someone who has witnessed countless such transitions. His role extends beyond mere customer service to include subtle monitoring of patron safety and discreet intervention when individuals appear to be consuming dangerous quantities or showing signs of medical distress. His observations over the years have taught him to recognize the difference between recreational users seeking temporary escape and individuals whose consumption patterns suggest developing dependency. The former typically maintain consistent routines and demonstrate awareness of their limits, while the latter show gradual increases in consumption, accompanied by deteriorating attention to personal appearance and social obligations. The economic structure of establishments like the Jade Garden reflects these different categories of clientele through pricing systems that encourage moderation, while maximizing revenue from regular patrons. Private suites command premium rates not just for privacy, but for the extended time periods they accommodate, allowing wealthy clients to experience deeper levels of intoxication while ensuring their safety through professional supervision. Communal chambers operate on different economic principles, offering access to high-quality opium at rates accessible to middle-class patrons while maintaining turnover that keeps the spaces profitable. The semi-private rooms serve clients whose needs fall between these extremes, providing moderate privacy at intermediate prices. This pricing structure creates natural segregation that reflects Shanghai's broader social hierarchies, while allowing for the cross-cultural interactions that made these establishments unique social institutions. A Chinese merchant and British trader might never interact as equals in the formal structures of colonial commerce, but in the democratic atmosphere of an opium den, this shared vulnerability creates opportunities for genuine human connection. The preparation of opium itself involves sophisticated knowledge that the establishment staff have refined through years of experience serving diverse clientele. Different patrons prefer different concentrations, heating techniques, and mixing preparations that optimize the drug's effects for their particular needs and tolerances. The raw opium arrives at establishments like the Jade Garden through complex supply chains that connect the poppy fields of India with the commercial networks of Shanghai's international settlement. British merchants operating under legal protections provided by colonial treaties import the drug in quantities that dwarf the consumption capacity of individual establishments, creating a distribution system that serves hundreds of similar venues throughout the city. The processing of raw opium into the refined preparations used in high-quality establishments requires specialized skills that combine pharmaceutical knowledge with artistic sensibility. Master preparers, often former users who have developed comprehensive understanding of the drug's properties, transform the sticky, bitter, raw material into smooth, sweet preparations that maximize both potency and palatability. These preparations vary not just in strength, but in character, with different techniques producing effects that emphasize either physical relaxation or mental clarity, immediate relief, or sustained duration. Regular patrons develop preferences for specific preparations that complement their individual physiology and desired outcomes. The tools used in opium consumption represent a sophisticated technology adapted to maximize the drug's effects while minimizing waste and health risks. Pipes range from simple bamboo implements suitable for occasional users to elaborate works of art crafted from precious materials and decorated with personal symbols or family emblems. The lamps used for heating opium require careful maintenance to ensure consistent flame temperatures that vaporize the drug without destroying its active compounds. The best establishments employ specialists whose sole responsibility involves maintaining these lamps and ensuring that each patron's smoking experience meets the highest standards of quality and safety. The cushions, platforms, and furniture found in opium dens reflect careful attention to ergonomics that support extended periods of reclined consumption. The positions required for proper pipe smoking demand support that maintains comfort while allowing easy access to heating lamps. And preparation surfaces These seemingly simple design elements represent accumulated wisdom from decades of observing how different body types and consumption preferences require different physical accommodations. The most successful establishments invest considerable resources in creating environments that enhance rather than detract from the opium experience. The social dynamics that emerge in these carefully designed spaces reveal aspects of human nature that remain hidden in more conventional settings. The reduction of social anxiety produced by opium consumption allows for interactions that transcend the usual boundaries of class, culture, and professional relationships. Conversations that begin with mundane topics often evolve into profound exchanges about mortality, purpose, and the search for meaning that occupies every human consciousness, but rarely finds expression in ordinary social interactions. The drug's effects on inhibition and empathy create psychological conditions conducive to genuine intimacy between strangers. These intimate exchanges serve important psychological functions for patrons, whose public lives require constant performance of social roles that may conflict with their authentic personalities. The opium den provides a temporary refuge where individuals can explore aspects of themselves that have no place in their professional or family identities. The friendships that sometimes develop between regular patrons represent unique forms of human connection based on shared vulnerability rather than common interests or mutual advantage. These relationships, conducted entirely within the boundaries of the establishment, often involve levels of emotional honesty that exceed those found in conventional friendships or even family relationships. The staff members who facilitate these interactions occupy complex positions that combine elements of hospitality, medical care, and psychological counseling. Their discretion extends beyond simple confidentiality to include understanding when patrons need solitude, companionship, or gentle guidance away from dangerous consumption patterns. The most skilled attendants develop intuitive abilities to read the emotional states of their clients and provide appropriate responses that enhance, rather than intrude upon the opium experience. This expertise requires not just knowledge of the drug's effects, but deep understanding of human psychology and the particular vulnerabilities that drive people to seek pharmaceutical escape from ordinary consciousness. As our evening in the Jade Garden approaches its natural conclusion, the establishment begins its gradual transition toward the quiet hours before dawn, when only the most dedicated patrons remain. The conversations have grown softer, more introspective, as the night's accumulation of shared smoke and intimate exchanges creates an atmosphere of profound peace that seems to exist entirely separate from the bustling commercial city that surrounds these walls. The last patrons to depart carry with them not just the pharmaceutical effects of their consumption, but memories of human connections that may represent the most authentic interactions they have experienced in months or years of navigating Shanghai's complex social and professional requirements. The patterns of departure from establishments like the Jade Garden follow rhythms as ancient as human nature itself. Some patrons slip away quietly, their movements careful and deliberate as they navigate the transition from the warm embrace of pharmaceutical peace back to the demanding realities of colonial Shanghai. Others linger in doorways, reluctant to break the spell that has temporarily freed them from the weight of their ordinary concerns. Outside, the narrow alley that leads back to Nanking Road seems transformed in the pre-dawn darkness. The same cobblestones that earlier rang with the sounds of commerce now lie silent under a thin mist that drifts up from the Haikou River. The red lantern that marks the entrance continues its gentle glow, a beacon for those who still seek refuge. In the hours when the city sleeps, but suffering remains wakeful, the attendant, Lao Wang, begins his final rounds of the evening, moving through each chamber with the quiet efficiency of someone whose work continues long after the last patron has departed. The lamps must be extinguished in proper sequence, the pipes cleaned and stored, the cushions arranged for the next day's visitors. His movements carry the weight of ritual, each action performed with the same careful attention that characterized his service to the evening's guests. In the communal chamber, traces of the night's gatherings remain visible, in the slight impressions left by bodies on silk cushions, in the lingering sweetness of opium smoke that clings to wooden walls, in the arrangement of pipes and lamps that tells the story of who sat where and how long they remained. These physical remnants of human presence create an archaeology of escape, a record of the search for peace that draws people from across Shanghai's diverse population to these hidden chambers. The morning cleaning ritual involves more than simple housekeeping. Each pipe must be examined for damage or residue that might affect its performance. Each lamp checked to ensure proper function. Each cushion inspected for signs of wear that could compromise patron comfort. This attention to detail reflects the establishment's understanding that the opium experience depends as much on environmental factors as on the quality of the drug itself. The preparation of fresh opium for the coming day begins in the hours before dawn, when skilled preparers transform raw materials into the refined substances that will provide relief to another day's collection of seekers. This process requires not just technical knowledge, but artistic sensibility, as different preparations serve different needs within the establishment's diverse clientele. The raw opium arrives in wooden chests marked with symbols indicating origin and quality grade. The finest preparations reserved for the private suites begin with opium harvested from specific regions of India known for producing the most potent and pure varieties. The processing involves heating, filtering, and repeated refinement that removes impurities while concentrating the active compounds that produce the desired psychological effects. Middle-grade preparations serve the semi-private chambers, offering reliable quality at intermediate prices. These substances undergo less extensive processing, but still meet standards that ensure consistent effects and minimize health risks. The preparers understand that patrons in these chambers often lack the economic resources to absorb the costs of premium preparations, but deserve access to safe, effective products. The communal chambers receive preparations that emphasize economy without sacrificing basic quality standards. These substances serve patrons whose financial circumstances require careful budgeting, but whose needs for pharmaceutical relief remain equally urgent. The democratic nature of opium's effects means that even basic preparations can provide meaningful escape from physical pain or psychological distress. The storage of prepared opium requires careful attention to temperature and humidity that preserve potency while preventing degradation. Special containers made from materials that do not react with the drug's chemical compounds maintain quality during the extended periods between preparation and consumption. The most valuable preparations receive individual storage in containers marked with preparation dates and quality indicators. The business operations of establishments like the Jade Garden involve complex financial calculations that balance patron satisfaction with profitability while managing the substantial risks associated with operating in Shanghai's semi-legal pharmaceutical economy. The initial investments required to create properly appointed facilities, hire skilled staff, and maintain adequate supplies of quality opium represent significant capital commitments that must be recovered through consistent patronage revenue. Streams include not just direct charges for opium consumption, but also fees for chamber access, pipe rental, and various levels of service that range from basic supervision to comprehensive personal attention. The private suites generate the highest profit margins, but serve the smallest number of patrons, while the communal chambers operate on thinner margins but accommodate larger volumes of customers. The establishment must also maintain relationships with suppliers, local officials, and competing venues that shape the broader opium economy in Shanghai. These relationships involve not just commercial negotiations, but also the delicate management of political connections that provide protection from law enforcement and regulatory interference. The staff hierarchy within establishments like the Jade Garden reflects the complex skills required to serve such diverse clientele effectively. At the apex stands the proprietor, often an individual with extensive experience in Shanghai's international business community who understands both the pharmaceutical aspects of opium and the cultural sensitivities of serving patrons from multiple ethnic and social backgrounds. Senior attendants like Lao Wang occupy positions that combine customer service excellence with medical knowledge and psychological insight. Their ability to read patron needs, anticipate problems, and provide appropriate interventions represents expertise that develops only through years of experience serving individuals in altered states of consciousness. Junior staff members handle routine tasks like lamp maintenance, chamber cleaning, and basic patron assistance, while learning the subtle skills required for advancement within the establishment's hierarchy. The training process involves not just technical instruction, but cultural education that prepares them to serve patrons, whose backgrounds and expectations may differ dramatically from their own. Specialized positions include opium preparers, whose pharmaceutical expertise ensures consistent product quality, security personnel who maintain discretion while preventing problems, and liaison staff who manage relationships with suppliers and officials. Each role requires specific skills that contribute to the establishment's overall ability to provide safe, satisfactory experiences for its diverse clientele. The seasonal patterns of opium consumption in Shanghai reflect the city's position as an international port where business cycles, weather patterns, and cultural holidays create predictable fluctuations in demand for pharmaceutical escape. Winter months typically see increased patronage as cold weather and reduced outdoor activities drive people toward indoor refuges that provide both physical warmth and psychological comfort. The summer season brings different challenges as heat and humidity affect both patron comfort and opium storage requirements. The most successful establishments invest in cooling systems and modified ventilation that maintain appropriate environmental conditions while preserving the intimate atmosphere that defines the opium experience. Commercial seasons tied to Shanghai's role in international trade create additional patterns as merchants, sailors, and business travelers seek relief from the stresses of completing transactions, managing cargo, or negotiating contracts. Arrival of large trading vessels often coincides with increased demand for opium services, particularly in the private suites favored by successful international businessmen. Cultural celebrations and religious observances also influence patronage patterns as individuals seek pharmaceutical assistance in managing the social obligations and emotional complexities associated with traditional festivals or family gatherings. The Lunar New Year period typically sees reduced patronage as family obligations take precedence, followed by increased demand as individuals seek relief from the stresses of extended family interaction, the medical aspects of opium consumption. And establishments like the Jade Garden involve sophisticated understanding of dosage, tolerance, and interaction effects that rival contemporary pharmaceutical knowledge. Skilled attendants learn to recognize the signs of appropriate consumption levels and intervene when patrons approach dangerous territory that could result in overdose or severe impairment. The establishment maintains supplies of remedial substances that can counteract excessive opium consumption, including preparations that promote alertness and coordination for patrons who have consumed more than intended. These safety measures reflect both humanitarian concerns and business necessity, as medical emergencies could attract unwanted official attention and damage the establishment's reputation. Regular patrons often develop tolerance levels that require careful monitoring to prevent dangerous escalation of consumption. Skilled attendants track individual tolerance patterns and provide guidance that helps patrons maintain effective relief without progressing toward levels of dependence that could compromise their ability to function in ordinary society. The establishment also maintains relationships with discreet medical practitioners who can provide treatment for complications arising from opium use or advice on managing consumption patterns that support rather than interfere with patrons. Professional and personal responsibilities. The cultural impact of establishments, like the Jade Garden, extends far beyond their immediate clientele to influence broader patterns of social interaction and cultural exchange in colonial Shanghai. The cross-cultural conversations that emerge in opium-influenced settings create understanding between ethnic groups that might otherwise remain segregated by colonial social structures. Chinese patrons gain exposure to foreign perspectives and business practices that inform their own commercial activities, while European visitors develop appreciation for Chinese philosophy and cultural traditions that transcend the superficial encounters typical of colonial relationships. These exchanges contribute to the gradual development of hybrid cultural forms that characterize Shanghai's unique position as an international city. The establishment serves as an informal meeting place where business relationships develop outside the formal structures of colonial commerce. Partnerships formed in the relaxed atmosphere of opium chambers often prove more durable than those negotiated in conventional business settings, as the shared vulnerability of pharmaceutical consumption creates bonds based on mutual trust rather than mere commercial advantage. The linguistic exchanges that occur in these multicultural environments contribute to the development of pidgin languages and cultural translation skills that facilitate broader communication across ethnic boundaries. Patrons learn not just vocabulary, but cultural concepts that enhance their ability to navigate Shanghai's complex international society. The architectural elements of establishments, like the Jade Garden, reflect careful attention to creating environments that support both the pharmaceutical effects of opium and the social interactions that define the complete experience. The low ceilings and intimate lighting create psychological conditions conducive to introspection and confidential conversation, while the arrangement of chambers allows for varying levels of privacy and social engagement. The decorative elements serve multiple functions beyond mere aesthetics. The carved wooden panels and painted screens provide visual interest that enhances the meditative aspects of opium consumption while also demonstrating cultural sophistication that appeals to educated patrons. The selection of artwork reflects understanding of diverse cultural traditions that make patrons from different backgrounds feel welcome and respected. The acoustic design of these spaces involves careful attention to sound transmission between chambers that allows for social awareness while maintaining conversation privacy. The soft furnishings and wooden construction materials absorb sound in ways that create intimate acoustic environments without complete isolation from the establishment's broader social atmosphere. The ventilation systems balance the need to maintain the sweet, smoky atmosphere that defines the opium experience with health requirements that prevent dangerous accumulations of smoke or carbon monoxide from heating lamps. The most sophisticated establishments employ ventilation designs that preserve ambience while ensuring patron safety. The economic relationships between establishments like the Jade Garden and Shanghai's broader commercial ecosystem involve complex networks of suppliers, service providers, and financial institutions that support the opium trade. Raw material suppliers maintain relationships with multiple establishments that provide market stability while ensuring consistent access to quality products. Local craftsmen produce the specialized furniture, pipes, lamps, and decorative elements that define the opium experience. These artisans develop expertise in creating products that meet the specific functional requirements of opium consumption while reflecting the cultural preferences of diverse clientele. Financial institutions provide services that support the substantial capital requirements of high-quality opium establishments while managing the risks associated with operating in Shanghai's complex legal environment. These relationships often involve informal arrangements that provide flexibility while maintaining the discretion required by both parties. The transportation networks that move opium from Indian production centers to Shanghai consumption sites involve coordination between international shipping companies, local distributors, and individual establishments. The logistics of maintaining consistent supplies while managing quality, control, and security requirements represent significant operational challenges that successful establishments master through experience and relationship development. The psychological profiles of regular patrons reveal patterns that illuminate the broader social and cultural stresses of colonial Shanghai life. Successful merchants often seek relief from the constant pressure of financial risk and market uncertainty that characterizes international trade in volatile political environments. Foreign residents frequently struggle with cultural isolation and the psychological costs of maintaining professional identities that may conflict with personal values or emotional needs. The opium experience provides temporary escape from these internal conflicts while offering opportunities for authentic human connection across cultural boundaries. Chinese intellectuals face particular challenges as traditional knowledge systems encounter foreign ideas and technologies that challenge fundamental assumptions about social organization and human nature. Opium provides relief from the cognitive dissonance created by rapid cultural change while offering access to cross-cultural conversations that facilitate intellectual adaptation. Women patrons often seek relief from social restrictions and medical conditions that receive inadequate attention from male-dominated healthcare systems. The opium experience provides not just pharmaceutical benefits, but also rare opportunities for social interaction outside the constraints of family and domestic responsibilities. The seasonal rhythms that govern life in establishments like the Jade Garden reflect both natural cycles and human patterns of stress and relief that transcend cultural boundaries. Spring months often see increased patronage as individuals seek assistance managing the psychological demands of new business ventures and social relationships that emerge with warmer weather. Summer brings different challenges as heat and humidity create physical discomfort that opium can alleviate, while longer daylight hours provide more time for the social interactions that define the complete opium experience. The establishment adapts its operations to accommodate changing patron needs while maintaining the consistent quality that builds customer loyalty. Autumn patronage often reflects the psychological preparation required for winter months when reduced daylight and colder temperatures can exacerbate depression and social isolation. Regular patrons learn to use opium as a tool for managing seasonal mood changes while maintaining their professional and personal responsibilities. Winter months see the heaviest patronage as individuals seek refuge from both physical cold and the psychological challenges of reduced social interaction. The establishment becomes a crucial social institution that provides warmth, companionship, and pharmaceutical relief during Shanghai's most challenging season. The daily cycles within the establishment create predictable patterns that accommodate different types of patrons and their varying schedules. Early evening hours typically serve business patrons who seek relief from daytime professional stresses while maintaining the ability to fulfill evening social obligations. Late evening patronage often includes individuals whose work schedules or family responsibilities limit their access to daytime relief. The establishment maintains full service capabilities during these hours to accommodate patrons whose needs are equally urgent regardless of timing. Midnight hours serve the most dedicated patrons, often individuals whose consumption patterns or tolerance levels require extended sessions to achieve desired effects. The staff maintains heightened attention during these periods to ensure patron safety while respecting their need for intensive pharmaceutical intervention. Pre-dawn hours typically see the establishment's most vulnerable patrons, individuals whose consumption patterns suggest developing dependency or whose life circumstances have created desperate need for pharmaceutical escape. The staff provides additional support and monitoring during these sensitive periods while maintaining the discretion that all patrons require. The training programs that prepare staff to serve such diverse clientele involve comprehensive education and cultural sensitivity, pharmaceutical safety, and human psychology that rivals professional medical education. New staff members begin with observation periods that allow them to understand the complex dynamics of opium consumption without immediately assuming responsibility for patron safety. Advanced training covers recognition of dangerous consumption patterns, intervention techniques that maintain patron dignity while preventing medical emergencies, and communication skills that allow effective service across language and cultural barriers. The most skilled staff members develop intuitive abilities to anticipate patron needs and provide appropriate responses without intrusive questioning or inappropriate familiarity. Specialized training programs prepare staff for different types of service challenges, from managing intoxicated patrons who have consumed excessive amounts to facilitating cross-cultural conversations that enhance the social aspects of the opium experience. The establishment invests significant resources in staff development because patron satisfaction depends heavily on service quality. Ongoing education ensures that staff members remain current with changes in opium preparation techniques, safety, procedures, and cultural expectations that affect their ability to serve Shanghai's evolving international clientele. The most successful establishments maintain training programs that produce staff expertise comparable to specialized medical or hospitality professionals. The evening activities in establishments like the Jade Garden create temporary communities that provide social support and human connection for individuals who might otherwise remain isolated within Shanghai's complex colonial society. These communities form spontaneously around shared experiences and mutual vulnerability rather than common backgrounds or interests. The conversations that emerge in these temporary communities often address fundamental questions about meaning, purpose, and human connection that find little place in the formal social structures of colonial Shanghai. Patrons discover that their deepest concerns about mortality, relationships, and personal authenticity transcend cultural and social boundaries. The mutual support that develops between regular patrons creates informal networks that sometimes extend beyond the establishment's walls to provide assistance with business problems, family difficulties, or medical issues. These relationships represent unique forms of social capital based on shared vulnerability rather than mutual advantage. The temporary nature of these communities allows for experimentation with different aspects of personality and social interaction that might be impossible in conventional settings where reputation and social position create restrictive expectations. Patrons can explore authentic self-expression while maintaining the privacy necessary to protect their public identities. The relationships that form within these walls demonstrate how shared pharmaceutical experiences create bonds that transcend the usual social hierarchies of colonial Shanghai. In one corner of the semi-private chamber, we observe an unlikely friendship developing between two men whose paths would never cross in ordinary circumstances. The first is Chen Wei, a bookkeeper for a small Chinese import firm whose modest salary barely covers his family's basic needs. The second is Thomas Ashworth, a junior clerk at a British trading house whose own financial circumstances are similarly constrained despite his privileged position within the colonial structure. Both men find themselves drawn to the same chamber, not by choice, but by economic necessity, unable to afford the privacy of individual suites, yet too proud to fully embrace the communal areas. Their initial encounters were marked by the awkward politeness that typically characterizes interactions between Chinese and British residents of Shanghai's international settlement. Chen Wei would nod respectfully when Thomas entered the chamber, while Thomas would offer the kind of distant courtesy expected of colonial officials toward local employees. Neither spoke directly to the other, though both were clearly aware of sharing the same space week after week. The transformation began gradually as the effects of regular opium consumption slowly dissolved the social barriers that both men had internalized. Thomas, whose education had filled his mind with assumptions about Chinese intellectual inferiority, found himself increasingly curious about the careful precision with which Chen Wei prepared his portions and managed his consumption. The Chinese man's obvious intelligence and self-discipline challenged stereotypes that Thomas had never previously questioned. Chen Wei, for his part, observed that Thomas treated the establishment's Chinese staff with unusual respect and seemed genuinely uncomfortable with the racial hierarchies that governed most colonial institutions. The young Englishman's obvious loneliness and his careful economy with his opium purchases suggested vulnerabilities that transcended cultural differences. Their first actual conversation emerged from a practical concern when Thomas noticed that Chen Wei appeared to be experiencing difficulties with his pipe. The heating mechanism had become clogged, preventing proper vaporization of the opium and threatening to waste the precious substance that represented a significant portion of Chen Wei's discretionary income. Thomas had observed the maintenance techniques used by the establishment staff and was able to suggest a simple remedy that restored the pipe's function. Chen Wei's grateful response led to a brief exchange about the practical aspects of opium consumption, which gradually expanded into broader conversation about their respective experiences in Shanghai's complex social environment. Over subsequent weeks, their interactions evolved into something approaching genuine friendship. Thomas shared his frustrations with the rigid expectations of colonial society, where success was measured primarily by one's ability to extract profit from Chinese labor and resources while maintaining appropriate social distance from local populations. His education had prepared him for administrative work, but had provided no guidance for navigating the moral complexities of colonial life. Chen Wei described his own struggles with rapid social change that had disrupted traditional patterns of family and community life, while offering few alternatives that preserved personal dignity and cultural identity. His work for a foreign firm provided economic stability, but required daily compromises with values that had been central to his upbringing and education. Their conversations, conducted in the mixture of English and Mandarin that served as Shanghai's informal lingua franca, revealed common concerns about authenticity, purpose, and the search for meaning in lives that seemed increasingly disconnected from their original intentions. Both men had come to Shanghai seeking opportunities that would improve their circumstances, but both had discovered that success in the city's commercial environment required sacrifices of personal integrity that they had not anticipated. Opium provided temporary relief from these internal conflicts while creating the psychological conditions necessary for honest self-examination and mutual understanding. Thomas began to appreciate the sophistication of Chinese philosophical traditions that informed Chen Wei's approach to life's challenges, while Chen Wei gained insight into the psychological pressures that drove British colonial behavior. Beyond simple greed or cultural superiority, their friendship became a source of mutual support that extended beyond their evening sessions in the opium den. Thomas began providing Chen Wei with information about foreign business practices that helped the Chinese man advance within his firm, while Chen Wei shared knowledge about local customs and relationships that enhanced Thomas's effectiveness in his administrative role. This exchange of practical assistance evolved into deeper forms of mutual support as both men recognized that their friendship represented one of the few authentic relationships available to them in Shanghai's artificial social environment. Thomas found in Chen Wei the intellectual companionship that his British colleagues, focused primarily on commercial success and social advancement, could not provide. Chen Wei discovered in Thomas a foreign perspective that helped him understand the broader forces shaping China's relationship with Western powers while maintaining respect for Chinese cultural achievements that most foreign residents dismissed as backward superstition. Their weekly sessions in the semi-private chamber became structured around this exchange of ideas and mutual support. They would begin each evening by sharing developments in their respective work situations, offering advice and encouragement that helped both men navigate professional challenges more effectively. As the opium took effect, their conversations would shift toward more philosophical topics that explored questions of personal identity, cultural change, and the search for authentic existence within artificial social structures. These discussions provided both men with intellectual stimulation that was unavailable in their ordinary social circles. The final portion of each evening was often spent in comfortable silence, each man pursuing his own thoughts while drawing comfort from the presence of genuine friendship. This pattern created a weekly rhythm that both men came to depend upon as their primary source of emotional and intellectual nourishment. The establishment staff observed this developing friendship with the quiet satisfaction that comes from witnessing human connection transcend artificial barriers. Lao Wang, in particular, took pride in facilitating an environment where such relationships could develop naturally without interference from the prejudices and expectations that governed most cross-cultural interactions in colonial Shanghai. The economic implications of Chen Wei and Thomas' friendship extended beyond their personal circumstances to represent broader possibilities for cooperation between Chinese and foreign residents of Shanghai. Their mutual assistance in professional matters demonstrated that collaborative relationships could benefit both parties more than the competitive dynamics that typically characterize colonial commerce. Thomas's growing understanding of Chinese business practices, informed by Chen Wei's insights, made him more effective in his administrative role, while also making him more sympathetic to Chinese concerns about fair treatment in commercial relationships. Chen Wei's enhanced knowledge of foreign expectations and procedures, gained through Thomas's explanations, improved his value to his employers while helping him maintain his cultural identity. Their friendship became a model that other patrons of the establishment began to notice and sometimes emulate. The barrier-breaking nature of their relationship created subtle pressure for other cross-cultural interactions that gradually changed the social atmosphere of the semi-private chambers, from polite segregation toward genuine multicultural community. The personal transformations that both men experienced through their friendship illustrate the broader potential for opium dens to serve as spaces for cultural bridge building in colonial societies. Thomas's evolving attitudes toward Chinese intellectual capacity and cultural achievements represented the kind of individual change that could eventually contribute to more equitable colonial relationships. Chen Wei's developing confidence in cross-cultural communication and his enhanced understanding of foreign perspectives prepared him for advancement, opportunities that required effective interaction with international clients and partners. His friendship with Thomas provided practical experience in building trust across cultural boundaries that served him well in professional contexts. The intellectual exchanges between Chun Wei and Thomas also contributed to their personal growth in ways that transcended immediate practical benefits. Thomas's exposure to Chinese philosophical traditions provided him with conceptual frameworks for understanding human nature and social relationships that enriched his personal worldview, beyond the narrow materialism that characterized most colonial thinking. Chun Wei's engagement with Western ideas about individual rights and social progress offered him new perspectives on traditional Chinese social structures while deepening his appreciation for cultural values that deserved preservation. Despite foreign influence, their conversations helped him develop a more nuanced understanding of cultural change that avoided both uncritical acceptance of foreign ideas and rigid rejection of all innovation. The documentation of friendships like that between Chun Wei and Thomas reveals the complex human dimensions of colonial relationships that formal historical records often overlook. Official documents focus on commercial transactions, political negotiations, and administrative procedures that provide little insight into the personal experiences of individuals. Navigating cross-cultural interactions in colonial environments, the Opium Den provided a unique space where such personal experiences could unfold naturally, free from the formal constraints and official expectations that shaped most documented interactions between Chinese and foreign residents of Shanghai. The informal nature of these relationships allowed for experimentation with different forms of cross-cultural communication and mutual understanding. The preservation of these personal narratives through the observations of establishment staff, like Luo Wang, provides valuable insight into the human costs and benefits of colonial social arrangements. The loneliness and cultural displacement experienced by individuals like Thomas and Chun Wei represents the personal dimension of broader historical forces that shape the development of modern China. The solutions that these individuals discovered through their friendship suggest possibilities for cross-cultural understanding that official colonial policies rarely explored or encouraged. Their success in building genuine mutual respect and support demonstrates that cultural barriers were often more artificial than fundamental. As our evening progresses deeper into the night hours, we encounter patrons whose stories reveal even more complex relationships with opium and its role in managing the psychological challenges of colonial life. In a private suite on the establishment's upper floor, we find Margaret Sinclair, one of the few women who regularly patronize high-end opium establishments in Shanghai. Margaret's presence in such venues represents a significant departure from the social conventions that typically governed European women's behavior in colonial settings. As the widow of a British merchant who died in a shipping accident 2 years earlier, she possesses both the financial resources and social independence necessary to pursue pharmaceutical relief from the depression and anxiety that have plagued her since her husband's death. Her weekly visits to the Jade Garden follow a carefully structured routine designed to provide maximum therapeutic benefit while minimizing the risk of social discovery that could damage her reputation and compromise her ability to manage her late husband's business interests. She arrives during the early evening hours when the establishment's clientele consists primarily of businessmen whose discretion she can depend upon. Margaret's approach to opium consumption reflects her background as the educated daughter of a physician who taught her to understand pharmaceutical substances as medical tools rather than mere recreational indulgences. She maintains detailed records of her consumption patterns, dosages, and therapeutic effects that demonstrate a scientific approach to self-medication that rivals professional medical practice. Her personal opium kit, housed in an elegant wooden case that appears to contain sewing supplies, includes precision instruments for measuring dosages and a collection of different opium preparations selected for their specific therapeutic properties. Her pipe, crafted from materials chosen for their chemical neutrality and ease of cleaning, represents a significant investment in equipment that supports safe, effective consumption. The therapeutic protocol that Margaret has developed through careful experimentation addresses not just her immediate symptoms of depression and anxiety, but also the chronic pain that resulted from injuries sustained during the accident that killed her husband. Her consumption schedule coordinates pharmaceutical relief with her business responsibilities and social obligations in ways that maximize function while maintaining the appearance of normal. Widow's grief. Margaret's presence in the establishment creates subtle changes in the social dynamics of the upper floor suites as other patrons adjust their behavior to accommodate a respectable woman whose obvious intelligence and social standing command respect despite her unconventional presence. In such venues, her conversations with other patrons, when they occur, tend to focus on practical matters related to business management, property investment, and the navigation of legal systems that were designed primarily to serve male interests. Her insights into these topics, informed by her necessity to master them following her husband's death, provide valuable perspectives for male patrons who have rarely considered the challenges faced by women in colonial commercial environments. The establishment staff treat Margaret with particular attention that reflects both her economic value as a premium patron and their recognition of the additional vulnerabilities she faces as a woman operating outside conventional social boundaries. Her safety and discretion receive priority attention that ensures her comfort while protecting her from potential complications that could arise from inappropriate attention from other patrons. Margaret's therapeutic use of opium represents one of the most sophisticated examples of self-medication practices that developed in response to the inadequate medical care available to women in colonial settings. Her success in using the drug to maintain function while managing serious physical and psychological symptoms demonstrates possibilities for pharmaceutical treatment that formal medical practice rarely explored. Her documentation of treatment outcomes provides evidence for opium's therapeutic potential that challenges contemporary assumptions about the drug's purely addictive and destructive nature. Her ability to maintain stable dosages, avoid tolerance escalation, and integrate pharmaceutical treatment with other therapeutic approaches suggests that problematic opium use was not inevitable, but rather reflected inadequate understanding of proper therapeutic applications. The business acumen that Margaret has developed since assuming control of her husband's commercial interests reflects the intellectual stimulation and enhanced confidence that she attributes partly to her therapeutic opium use. The drug's anxiety-reducing effects have enabled her to engage in negotiations and decision-making processes that might otherwise have been overwhelming given her grief and inexperience with commercial operations. Her success in maintaining and expanding her business interests while managing her pharmaceutical treatment demonstrates the possibility for women to achieve economic independence even within the constraints of colonial social structures. Her example influences other women who observe her competence and begin to question assumptions about female intellectual and commercial capabilities. The private suite that Margaret typically occupies has been modified to accommodate her specific needs and preferences, including improved lighting for reading business documents and enhanced privacy measures that protect her from unwanted attention. These modifications reflect the establishment's recognition that serving female clientele requires different approaches than those used for male patrons. The therapeutic benefits that Margaret derives from her opium use extend beyond immediate symptom relief to include enhanced creativity and problem-solving abilities that improve her business performance. She reports that the drug's effects on consciousness allow her to approach complex commercial problems from new perspectives that generate innovative solutions. Her experience suggests that opium's reputation as a drug that impairs function and judgment may reflect primarily inappropriate usage patterns rather than inherent properties of the substance. When used therapeutically by informed individuals with specific medical needs, the drug appears capable of enhancing rather than diminishing intellectual and practical capabilities. The social isolation that Margaret experiences as a widow operating independently in colonial Shanghai creates psychological pressures that her opium use helps to manage. The drug provides relief from loneliness and social anxiety that enables her to maintain the professional relationships necessary for business success while preserving her emotional equilibrium. Her presence in the establishment also provides other patrons with opportunities to interact with an intelligent, accomplished woman whose perspectives enrich the intellectual discourse that characterizes the opium den social environment. Her contributions to conversations about business, politics, and social issues demonstrate female intellectual capabilities that many male patrons have rarely encountered. The relationships that Margaret develops with other regular patrons create informal support networks that provide practical assistance with business challenges and personal problems. These relationships, built on mutual respect rather than romantic interest, demonstrate possibilities for cross-gender friendship that colonial social conventions rarely accommodated. Her friendship with Chen Wei and Thomas, which developed through shared presence in the establishment's common areas, provides her with insights into Chinese business practices and British administrative procedures that enhance her commercial effectiveness. Their mutual support creates a multicultural alliance that benefits all parties, while challenging conventional assumptions about appropriate social relationships. The evening conversations between Margaret, Chen Wei, and Thomas represent some of the most sophisticated intellectual exchanges that occur within the establishment's walls. Their discussions range from philosophical questions about cultural identity and personal authenticity to practical matters concerning business strategy and political developments that affect Shanghai's commercial environment. These conversations provide all three individuals with intellectual stimulation and emotional support that would be difficult to find elsewhere in Shanghai's segregated social environment. Their friendship demonstrates the potential for opium dens to serve as spaces where artificial social barriers dissolve to allow genuine intellectual and personal connections. The documentation of Margaret's experiences provides valuable insight into the challenges faced by women who attempted to operate independently in colonial commercial environments. Her success in using opium therapeutically while maintaining business responsibilities challenges stereotypes about both female capabilities and pharmaceutical effects that dominated contemporary thinking. Her careful approach to opium use also provides a model for therapeutic applications that avoided the problematic patterns typically associated with opium addiction. Her ability to maintain stable consumption levels while achieving sustained therapeutic benefits suggests that many negative outcomes associated with opium use resulted from inappropriate usage patterns rather than inherent properties of the drug. The establishment's accommodation of Margaret's specific needs demonstrates the flexibility and customer service excellence that characterize the most successful opium venues in Shanghai. Their willingness to modify facilities and procedures to serve female clientele reflects understanding that expanding their market required adapting to diverse patron requirements. The economic success that Margaret achieves while managing her therapeutic opium use provides evidence for the drug's potential to enhance rather than impair function when used appropriately. Her business expansion during the period of her opium treatment challenges assumptions about the inevitability of pharmaceutical impairment and suggests alternative models for understanding drug effects. As the night deepens and the establishment's atmosphere becomes even more intimate and contemplative, we encounter another regular patron whose story illuminates different aspects of opium's role in colonial Shanghai society. Dr. Heinrich Müller, a German physician whose official position involves treating members of the international community, represents the complex relationship between medical professionals and opium used during this historical period. Dr. Müller's presence in the establishment reflects not recreational indulgence, but professional necessity, as he seeks relief from the psychological trauma of practicing medicine in an environment where his therapeutic options are severely limited by available treatments and cultural barriers that prevent effective patient care. His medical training, completed at European universities that emphasize scientific approaches to pharmaceutical treatment, initially made him skeptical of opium's therapeutic applications beyond basic pain relief. However, his experiences treating patients in Shanghai's challenging medical environment gradually convinced him that the drug possessed therapeutic properties that formal medical education had not adequately explored. Dr. Müller's own therapeutic use of opium began as an experiment in self-medication, designed to address the chronic insomnia and anxiety that developed as a result of his frustration with the limitations of colonial medical practice. His scientific background enabled him to approach opium use systematically, documenting effects and adjusting dosages with the precision that characterized his professional work. His presence in the establishment provides other patrons with access to medical expertise, but enhances the safety of their own opium use, while he maintains professional boundaries that prevent him from providing formal medical treatment to fellow patrons. His informal advice and observation help prevent medical emergencies and optimize therapeutic outcomes. The conversations that Dr. Müller engages in with other patrons often focus on the intersection between pharmaceutical treatment and psychological well-being, topics that his medical training and personal experience with opium uniquely qualify him to address. His perspectives help other patrons understand their own consumption patterns and therapeutic goals more clearly. His documentation of opium's effects on various types of patients, combined with his personal experience as a therapeutic user, provides valuable evidence for the drug's medical applications that formal medical literature rarely acknowledged. His observations suggest that many negative outcomes associated with opium use resulted from inadequate medical supervision rather than inherent dangers of the substance. Dr. Müller's therapeutic protocol involves carefully timed consumption that coordinates with his professional responsibilities and personal needs for psychological restoration. His approach demonstrates possibilities for integrating pharmaceutical treatment with demanding professional obligations in ways that enhance rather than compromise performance. The establishment staff regard Dr. Müller as a valuable resource, whose medical expertise contributes to the overall safety and quality of services provided to all patrons. His presence provides additional security for high-risk consumption sessions, and his advice helps staff members recognize and respond appropriately to medical emergencies. The medical knowledge that Dr. Müller shares with other patrons creates informal educational opportunities that improve understanding of pharmaceutical safety and therapeutic applications. His willingness to discuss opium's medical properties helps dispel misconceptions and promotes more effective therapeutic use among the establishment's clientele. His friendship with Margaret Sinclair develops around their shared interest in therapeutic applications of opium and their common experience of using pharmaceutical treatment to maintain function despite significant personal challenges. Their conversations provide both individuals with intellectual companionship and practical support for their therapeutic goals. The scientific approach that both Dr. Müller and Margaret bring to their opium use creates opportunities for systematic observation and documentation of therapeutic outcomes that contribute to broader understanding of the drug's medical applications. Their collaboration in recording and analyzing treatment effects provides evidence for pharmaceutical possibilities that formal medical research rarely explored. Their presence in the establishment elevates the intellectual atmosphere and provides other patrons with examples of sophisticated, purposeful approaches to opium use that contrast with recreational consumption patterns. Their success in achieving therapeutic goals while maintaining professional and social responsibilities demonstrates alternative models for pharmaceutical treatment. The evening conversations between Dr. Mueller, Margaret, Chinwei, and Thomas create a multicultural intellectual salon that addresses topics ranging from medical ethics and pharmaceutical policy to cultural philosophy and social change. These discussions provide all participants with perspectives and insights that enrich their understanding of the complex social environment in which they operate. The relationships that develop between these four individuals demonstrate the potential for opium dens to serve as spaces where artificial social barriers dissolve to allow genuine intellectual and personal connections. Their mutual support and shared exploration of ideas create a temporary community that provides psychological and intellectual nourishment unavailable elsewhere in Shanghai's segregated society. The documentation of their experiences provides valuable insight into the human dimensions of colonial life and the creative solutions that individuals develop to address the psychological and social challenges of cross-cultural existence. Their stories illuminate possibilities for human connection and mutual understanding that transcend the limitations of formal colonial social structures. The documentation of these interconnected relationships reveals how the most successful opium establishments function as more than mere pharmaceutical dispensaries, evolving into complex social institutions that address multiple needs within colonial society. The Jade Garden's ability to attract and retain such diverse, yet sophisticated clientele reflected careful attention to creating environments that supported both individual therapeutic goals and meaningful social interaction. The evening's progression towards the deepest hours of night brings subtle changes in the establishment's atmosphere as conversations become more introspective, and the pace of activity slows to match the contemplative mood that opium naturally encourages. The oil lamps burn lower, casting longer shadows that soften the already intimate lighting and create an atmosphere of profound peace that seems to exist outside ordinary time. In the communal chamber, we observe how the shared experience of pharmaceutical contemplation creates bonds between strangers that transcend the usual social barriers. A young Portuguese sailor finds himself engaged in halting conversation with an elderly Chinese scholar, their exchange facilitated by gestures and the few words of each other's languages they have managed to acquire during their respective journeys through Shanghai's international community. The sailor speaks of storms encountered during the voyage from Macau, his words coming slowly as he searches for English terms that might convey the terror and beauty of massive waves illuminated by lightning. His audience listens with the intense attention that characterizes opium-influenced conversation, where each shared experience takes on heightened significance and emotional resonance. The scholar responds with his own memories of natural forces, describing typhoons that swept across the countryside, of his youth bringing destruction, but also renewal as floodwaters deposited fertile soil that ensured abundant harvests in subsequent years. His philosophical interpretation of natural cycles provides the sailor with new perspectives on the storms that have shaped his professional life at sea. Their conversation illustrates how opium's effects on consciousness create psychological conditions conducive to the kind of meaningful exchange that rarely occurs between individuals from such different backgrounds and life experiences. The drug's ability to reduce social anxiety, while enhancing empathy, allows for communication that transcends language barriers and cultural differences. Adjacent to this cross-cultural dialogue, Another scene unfolds that reveals different aspects of the opium experience. A middle-aged bees merchant lies in solitary contemplation, his breathing so regular and peaceful that he appears to be sleeping, though his open eyes suggest a state of wakeful meditation that opium uniquely facilitates. This gentleman, whom the staff know as Mr. Wu, represents a significant portion of Shanghai's opium clientele, who seek not social interaction but profound solitude that allows for introspection, impossible amid the constant demands of family and business responsibilities. His weekly sessions serve as psychological retreats that restore his emotional equilibrium and provide clarity for complex decisions that affect not just his own welfare, but the livelihoods of dozens of employees and their families. Mr. Wu's approach to opium consumption reflects the careful balance required by individuals whose public responsibilities demand constant alertness and sound judgment. His portions are precisely measured to provide therapeutic relief without impairing his ability to resume his business activities, demonstrating the sophisticated understanding of pharmaceutical effects that many regular users developed through careful experimentation. His presence in the communal chamber rather than a private suite reflects both economic considerations and his preference for the subtle human contact that shared spaces provide without requiring active social engagement. The awareness of other people's presence offers comfort without the obligations that formal conversation would impose. The establishment's design supports different styles of opium consumption and social interaction through careful arrangement of spaces and furnishings that accommodate varying needs for privacy, companionship, and contemplation. The communal chambers provide opportunities for social connection, while also offering corners and alcoves where individuals can maintain relative solitude within the shared environment. The platform arrangements allow patrons to position themselves according to their comfort with social interaction, from central locations that invite conversation to peripheral spaces that discourage unwanted attention while still providing access to the chamber's social atmosphere. This flexibility enables the establishment to serve diverse clientele whose needs for human contact vary significantly. The semi-private chambers offer intermediate levels of social engagement that appeal to patrons who desire more intimate conversation than the communal areas provide, but lack the resources or inclination for complete privacy. These spaces often develop their own social dynamics, as regular patrons establish informal territories and relationships that persist across multiple visits. The private suites cater to individuals whose consumption patterns, social positions, or personal preferences require complete discretion and control over their pharmaceutical experience. These spaces allow for the deepest levels of opium-induced introspection, while providing security from observation or interruption that might compromise the therapeutic process. The progression through these different levels of privacy and social engagement reflects not just economic stratification, but different approaches to using opium for therapeutic and recreational purposes. The most successful establishments understand these distinctions and provide appropriate environments for each type of consumption pattern. The staff's expertise in reading patron needs and preferences enables them to provide guidance that helps individuals find the most suitable spaces and consumption approaches for their particular circumstances and goals. This personalized service contributes significantly to patron satisfaction and the establishment's reputation for quality care. The evening's activities also reveal the complex relationship between opium consumption and creative expression that characterized many users' experiences during this historical period. In one corner of a semi-private chamber, a young man whose appearance suggests artistic inclinations sits propped against silk cushions, while sketching in a small notebook with obvious absorption and satisfaction. This individual, whom we might Cao Liu Ming works as a clerk in a foreign trading house during daylight hours, but pursues painting and poetry during his limited free time. His opium sessions serve dual purposes as they provide relief from the monotony of commercial work while enhancing his creative perception and artistic inspiration. The drug's effects on visual perception and imaginative capacity create conditions that Liu Ming finds invaluable for artistic development. Colors appear more vivid, spatial relationships become more apparent, and the boundaries between observed reality and creative interpretation seem more fluid and permeable. His sketches, created during opium sessions, often capture aspects of human emotion and social interaction that escape his ordinary observation. The enhanced empathy and psychological insight that the drug provides allow him to perceive and document subtle expressions and gestures that reveal the inner lives of his fellow patrons. The artistic work produced during these sessions later serves as source material for more elaborate paintings and poems that Liu Ming creates during his sober hours. The creative insights gained through pharmaceutical enhancement inform his artistic development in ways that purely technical training could not achieve. His presence in the establishment provides other patrons with opportunities to observe the creative process and engage in conversations about art, beauty, and aesthetic experience that enrich the intellectual atmosphere of the chambers. His willingness to share his artistic observations creates educational opportunities that benefit the broader patron community. The sketches themselves become informal records of the establishment's social life, documenting the faces, gestures, and interactions that characterize the opium experience. These artistic documents preserve aspects of human experience that formal historical records rarely capture, providing unique insights into the personal dimensions of colonial social life. Liu Ming's artistic pursuits also demonstrate how opium use could support rather than impair creative productivity when approached with appropriate goals and methods. His success in integrating pharmaceutical enhancement with artistic development challenges assumptions about drug effects that emphasize only negative outcomes and impaired function. The conversations that develop around Liu Ming's artistic activities often explore philosophical questions about the relationship between altered consciousness and creative expression, topics that fascinate both Chinese scholars versed in traditional aesthetics and foreign patrons curious about artistic traditions different from their own cultural backgrounds. These discussions contribute to cross-cultural understanding as participants share perspectives on beauty, creativity, and the role of altered consciousness in artistic and spiritual development. The opium-influenced setting creates psychological conditions conducive to appreciating different cultural approaches to aesthetic experience. The establishment's tolerance and even encouragement of artistic activities reflects understanding that opium dens serve multiple functions beyond simple pharmaceutical provision. The most successful venues recognize that supporting patron creativity and intellectual development enhances customer satisfaction and builds loyalty that transcends purely commercial relationships. The creative atmosphere that develops around Liu Ming's presence also influences other patrons to explore their own artistic inclinations and creative interests. Several regular visitors have begun bringing their own materials for writing, sketching, or other creative pursuits that benefit from the enhanced perception and reduced inhibition that opium provides. As the evening progresses toward its conclusion, the establishment's social dynamics shift toward more intimate and personal exchanges, as the accumulated effects of shared pharmaceutical experience create bonds of trust and understanding between patrons who might otherwise remain strangers. The barriers that normally separate individuals from different social backgrounds begin to dissolve under the influence of mutual vulnerability and enhanced empathy. In the communal chamber, we observe the formation of temporary communities that provide emotional support and intellectual stimulation for individuals whose ordinary lives offer limited opportunities for genuine human connection. A circle of 5 men from completely different backgrounds finds themselves engaged in a conversation about memory, loss, and the search for meaning that transcends their diverse personal circumstances. The group includes the Portuguese sailor we encountered earlier, the elderly Chinese scholar, Mr. Wu the merchant, Liu Ming the artist, and a Russian trader whose presence in Shanghai reflects the complex international relationships that characterize the city's commercial environment. Their conversation proceeds in multiple languages, with frequent translation and explanation that creates a collaborative effort to understand and communicate across cultural boundaries. The Russian trader shares memories of his childhood in Siberia, describing landscapes and experiences so different from his companions' backgrounds that his words create vivid images of a world none of them could otherwise imagine. His descriptions of winter storms and endless forests provide his listeners with expanded understanding of human experience and geographic diversity. The Chinese scholar responds with observations about the relationship between landscape and human character, drawing on philosophical traditions that interpret natural environments as influences on cultural development and individual personality. His insights help the group understand how their different backgrounds have shaped their approaches to life and their responses to the challenges they face in Shanghai. Mr. Wu contributes practical observations about how different cultural backgrounds affect business relationships and commercial success, sharing examples from his own experience of learning to work effectively with partners from various ethnic and national backgrounds. His perspectives provide valuable insights for the other men, who must navigate similar cross-cultural challenges in their own work. Liu Ming offers artistic interpretations of the experiences shared by his companions, suggesting how different cultural perspectives on beauty and meaning might be expressed through visual or literary art. His creative insights help the group appreciate the aesthetic dimensions of their diverse backgrounds and experiences. The Portuguese sailor provides maritime perspectives that connect the group's diverse geographical origins through the common element of ocean travel that has brought them all to Shanghai. His stories of different ports and coastal cultures create a framework for understanding how global commerce creates connections between distant places and peoples. Their conversation demonstrates how opium's effects on consciousness can facilitate the kind of meaningful cross-cultural dialogue that formal diplomatic or commercial interactions rarely achieve. The drug's ability to reduce prejudice while enhancing curiosity and empathy creates conditions where genuine mutual understanding becomes possible. The bonds that form during such conversations often persist beyond individual opium sessions, creating informal networks of mutual support and friendship that enrich the social lives of all participants. These relationships provide practical benefits as well as emotional satisfaction. As individuals with diverse skills and knowledge share resources and assistance, the establishment's role in facilitating these cross-cultural connections contributes to Shanghai's development as a truly international city where different ethnic and national communities can interact productively rather than merely coexisting in separate enclaves. The Opium Den serves as a social laboratory where new forms of multicultural cooperation can develop and flourish. The documentation of these interactions provides valuable evidence for the potential of pharmaceutical environments to support, rather than undermine, social cohesion and cross-cultural understanding. The success of these informal communities challenges assumptions about drug effects that emphasize only antisocial and destructive outcomes. The evening's final hours bring the most profound and intimate exchanges as patrons who have developed trust and rapport through shared pharmaceutical experience engage in conversations about topics too personal or sensitive for ordinary social interaction. The psychological safety created by mutual vulnerability allows for discussions of fears, dreams, regrets, and aspirations that rarely find expression in conventional settings. In one private suite, Dr. Mueller and Margaret Sinclair find themselves engaged in a conversation about the ethical challenges they face in their respective professional lives, sharing concerns and moral dilemmas that they could not discuss with colleagues or family members. Their mutual understanding of the pressures created by professional responsibility in colonial environments creates a foundation for meaningful dialogue about complex moral questions. Dr. Mueller describes his frustration with medical limitations that prevent him from providing effective treatment for many conditions, particularly those affecting women and Chinese patients whose cultural backgrounds create barriers to conventional therapeutic approaches. His professional training emphasizes scientific methods that often prove inadequate for addressing the complex psychological and social factors that contribute to illness in colonial settings. Margaret shares her experiences navigating business environments designed primarily to serve male interests, describing the additional challenges she faces as a woman attempting to maintain commercial success while preserving personal integrity and dignity. Her insights into gender-based discrimination provide Dr. Mueller with new perspectives on social factors that affect health and well-being. Their conversation explores the intersection between personal ethics and professional necessity, examining how individuals can maintain moral integrity while operating within systems that often reward compromise and exploitation. The shared use of opium for therapeutic purposes creates common ground for understanding how pharmaceutical treatment can support ethical behavior rather than undermining moral judgment. The trust that develops between Dr. Mueller and Margaret through their honest examination of professional challenges creates a foundation for mutual support that extends beyond their pharmaceutical sessions. Their friendship provides both individuals with intellectual companionship and moral support that helps them maintain their ethical standards despite external pressures. Their discussions also address broader questions about social responsibility and individual agency in colonial environments, exploring how people can work for positive change while acknowledging the limitations imposed by political and economic structures beyond their control. Their perspectives inform each other's approaches to professional challenges and personal growth. The private nature of their conversations allows for exploration of topics that public discourse rarely addresses, including the psychological costs of colonial life and the strategies that individuals develop for maintaining mental health and emotional equilibrium in challenging social environments. The establishment provides the secure environment necessary for such intimate exchanges, ensuring that personal revelations and vulnerable admissions remain confidential while creating conditions that encourage honest self-examination and mutual support. The staff's discretion and professional competence contribute significantly to the therapeutic value of these interactions. As dawn approaches and the establishment begins its transition toward the quiet hours when only the most dedicated patrons remain, the evening's accumulation of shared experiences and meaningful connections creates a sense of temporary community that provides psychological nourishment for individuals whose ordinary lives offer limited opportunities for authentic human relationship. The gradual departure of patrons follows patterns that reflect both practical considerations and emotional attachments formed during the evening social interactions. Some individuals leave reluctantly, drawing out their farewells as they attempt to preserve connections that have provided unexpected satisfaction and support. Others depart quietly, carrying with them the insights and emotional restoration gained through pharmaceutical treatment and social interaction. Their movements are careful and deliberate as they manage the transition from the protected environment of the establishment to the demanding realities of colonial Shanghai streets and social expectations. The staff observes these departures with understanding born of years of experience, witnessing the human need for connection and meaning that draws people to establishments like the Jade Garden. Their professional competence ensures that departing patrons are prepared for safe return to their ordinary responsibilities, while their personal compassion acknowledges the emotional significance of the experiences they have facilitated. Physical traces of the evening's activities remain visible in the arrangement of cushions and the lingering sweetness of opium, smoke that clings to wooden walls and silk furnishings. These environmental markers preserve the memory of human connections and shared experiences that have provided temporary relief from the isolation and challenges of colonial life. The cleaning and preparation rituals that follow each evening's activities serve both practical and symbolic functions as the establishment prepares to offer the same opportunities for pharmaceutical treatment and social connection to another day's collection of individuals seeking relief from the psychological pressures of cross-cultural existence in rapidly changing Shanghai. The cycle of evening activities, shared experiences, and morning departures creates rhythms of human connection and renewal that serve essential functions for individuals whose circumstances provide few other opportunities for authentic social interaction and emotional support. The opium den's role in facilitating these human needs demonstrates the complex social functions that such establishments served beyond their obvious pharmaceutical purposes. The stories that emerge from evening sessions at establishments like the Jade Garden provide unique insights into the personal experiences of individuals navigating the challenges of colonial social environments. These human narratives illuminate aspects of historical experience that formal records rarely capture, revealing the creativity and resilience that people demonstrated in addressing the psychological costs of cultural displacement and social fragmentation. The documentation of these personal narratives reveals how establishments like the Jade Garden functioned as repositories of human experience that would otherwise disappear without trace into the anonymity of historical record. The conversations, relationships, and individual transformations that occurred within these walls created a rich tapestry of human connection that transcended the formal boundaries imposed by colonial society. The morning light filtering through the narrow windows of the upper floors creates gentle illumination that softens the evidence of the night's activities while highlighting the careful craftsmanship evident in every detail of the establishment's construction and furnishing. The carved wooden screens that provide privacy between chambers cast intricate shadows that dance with the movement of silk curtains stirred by the gentle breeze from the river. The transition from night to day brings subtle changes in the establishment's character as the intimate atmosphere of evening gradually gives way to the practical requirements of maintenance and preparation for another cycle of human needs and pharmaceutical relief. The staff moves through their morning routines with quiet efficiency that preserves the peaceful ambiance while ensuring that every detail meets the exacting standards that define quality service. The relationships between staff members reflect years of shared responsibility for creating and maintaining environments that support both individual therapeutic goals and meaningful social interaction. Their professional competence extends beyond technical knowledge of opium preparation and consumption to include sophisticated understanding of human psychology and the complex needs that draw people to seek pharmaceutical assistance. The head attendant's morning inspection encompasses not just physical details like lamp maintenance and chamber cleanliness, but also assessment of the previous evening's social dynamics and their implications for future service delivery. His observations inform adjustments to seating arrangements, lighting levels, and service protocols that optimize patron satisfaction and safety. The preparation areas where opium undergoes transformation from raw material to refined pharmaceutical products represent centers of specialized knowledge that combine traditional techniques with innovations developed through years of serving diverse clientele. The master preparers who oversee these processes possess expertise that rivals formally trained pharmacists in their understanding of drug properties and therapeutic applications. The storage facilities that preserve prepared opium maintain precise environmental conditions that prevent degradation while ensuring consistent potency and quality. The investment in proper storage equipment reflects understanding that pharmaceutical effectiveness depends as much on preservation techniques as on initial preparation methods. The economic calculations that govern daily operations involve complex considerations that balance immediate profitability with long-term reputation management and patron loyalty development. The most successful establishments understand that short-term cost savings that compromise service quality ultimately damage the customer relationships that sustain profitable operations. The supply relationships that ensure consistent access to quality raw materials require careful cultivation of connections with international trading networks that operate within Shanghai's complex legal and political environment. These relationships often involve personal friendships and mutual obligations that extend far beyond simple commercial transactions. The architectural modifications that adapt traditional Chinese building techniques to the specialized requirements of opium consumption demonstrate creative solutions to unique functional challenges. The ventilation systems that manage smoke while preserving atmosphere, the acoustic treatments that balance privacy with social awareness, and the lighting designs that support both individual contemplation and group interaction represent sophisticated environmental engineering. The decorative elements that contribute to the establishment's atmosphere serve multiple functions beyond aesthetic appeal. The scroll paintings that adorn chamber walls provide visual focal points that enhance meditative aspects of opium consumption while demonstrating cultural sophistication that appeals to educated patrons from diverse backgrounds. The textile selections for cushions, curtains, and wall hangings involve careful attention to materials that maintain appearance and comfort, despite constant use while contributing to acoustic and atmospheric qualities that define the opium experience. The colors and patterns chosen reflect understanding of psychological effects that different visual environments produce. The furniture designs that support extended periods of reclined consumption represent specialized solutions to ergonomic challenges that conventional seating cannot address. The platforms, cushions, and side tables that accommodate pipes, lamps, and personal belongings demonstrate accumulated wisdom about the physical requirements of comfortable opium use. The lighting systems that create intimate atmospheres while ensuring adequate illumination for safe consumption involve careful coordination of oil lamps, candles, and natural light sources that produce the gentle, warm illumination that characterizes quality opium establishments. The seasonal adaptations that maintain patron comfort throughout Shanghai's varying weather conditions require flexible systems that can accommodate temperature and humidity changes while preserving the consistent atmospheric qualities that define the establishment's character. Winter preparations involve additional heating sources and draft protection that maintain warmth without compromising air quality or creating fire hazards. The coal braziers and charcoal heaters used during cold months require careful management to prevent carbon monoxide accumulation while providing adequate thermal comfort. Summer modifications include enhanced ventilation and cooling systems that maintain air circulation without disturbing the gentle smoke patterns that contribute to the opium atmosphere. The strategic placement of fans and the opening of specific windows create air movement that provides relief from heat while preserving the establishment's distinctive ambiance. The spring and autumn seasons require different approaches to environmental management, as changing weather patterns create varying challenges for maintaining optimal conditions. The staff develops expertise in reading atmospheric conditions and adjusting environmental controls to compensate for external influences. The cultural celebrations that mark important dates in Shanghai's diverse community calendar create opportunities for special events and modified service offerings that acknowledge the customs and preferences of different ethnic groups within the establishment's clientele. The Chinese New Year period typically sees reduced operations as staff members return to family celebrations, while many regular patrons fulfill traditional obligations. The establishment uses this period for major maintenance projects and equipment upgrades that would be disruptive during normal operating periods. The Western Christmas season brings different patterns of patronage as foreign residents navigate the emotional complexities of celebrating familiar holidays and unfamiliar cultural environments. The establishment often provides refuge for individuals who find holiday obligations emotionally challenging or who lack family connections in Shanghai. The Buddhist and Taoist festivals that punctuate the Chinese calendar create opportunities for special preparations and ceremonial observances that honor the spiritual traditions of Chinese patrons while educating foreign visitors about local customs and beliefs. The commercial seasons that reflect Shanghai's role in international trade create predictable patterns of stress and celebration that influence patronage levels and service requirements. The arrival of major trading fleets often coincides with increased demand for pharmaceutical relief from the pressures of intensive commercial activity. The tea harvest seasons bring particular significance as merchants and traders involved in Shanghai's most important export industries seek relief from the intense pressures of quality assessment, price negotiation, and logistics coordination that determine annual profits and losses. The silk trading seasons create similar patterns of stress and opportunity as merchants navigate the complex requirements of international textile markets, while managing relationships with producers, transporters, and foreign buyers whose cultural differences can complicate negotiations. The rice trading activities that feed Shanghai's growing population create additional commercial pressures that drive demand for pharmaceutical relief among merchants responsible for ensuring adequate food supplies while maintaining profitable operations. The documentation systems that track patron preferences, consumption patterns, and service requirements represent sophisticated customer relationship management that ensures personalized service delivery while maintaining the discretion that all patrons require. The record-keeping practices that monitor opium quality, staff performance, and financial outcomes provide management information necessary for maintaining service standards while optimizing profitability and operational efficiency. The communication networks that connect the establishment with suppliers, competitors, and regulatory authorities require careful cultivation of relationships that provide advanced warning of potential problems while creating opportunities for cooperative problem solving. The training programs that prepare new staff members for service excellence involve comprehensive education in cultural sensitivity, pharmaceutical safety, and customer service techniques that enable effective performance in Shanghai's multicultural environment. The promotional activities that attract new patrons while maintaining discretion involve subtle marketing approaches that communicate quality and safety without creating unwanted attention from regulatory authorities or moral reform movements. The quality control measures that ensure consistent pharmaceutical effects and service delivery involve systematic monitoring of all aspects of operation, from raw material procurement through final service delivery to departing patrons. The safety protocols that prevent medical emergencies while maintaining patron privacy require staff expertise in recognizing dangerous consumption patterns and implementing interventions that preserve dignity while ensuring health and safety. The security measures that protect both patrons and staff from potential criminal activity or official harassment involve careful coordination with local authorities and informal networks that provide advanced warning of potential problems. The maintenance schedules that preserve facilities and equipment in optimal condition require systematic attention to all physical aspects of the establishment, from structural integrity through decorative details that contribute to atmospheric quality. The financial management practices that ensure profitable operations while maintaining service quality involve careful balance between cost control and investment in improvements that enhance patron satisfaction and competitive advantage. The relationship management activities that maintain harmony between diverse patron groups require subtle intervention in potential conflicts while fostering the cross-cultural understanding that makes the establishment attractive to international clientele. The evening activities that we observe represent just one cycle and patterns of human need and pharmaceutical response that repeat daily throughout Shanghai's network of opium establishments. Each venue develops its own character and clientele while serving similar functions within the broader social ecosystem of colonial society. The individual stories that unfold within these walls reflect universal human needs for connection, understanding, and relief from suffering that transcend the specific historical circumstances of late 19th century Shanghai. The creative solutions that patrons and staff develop for addressing these needs demonstrate human resilience and adaptability in challenging social environments. The cross-cultural exchanges that occur naturally within opium-influenced settings create opportunities for mutual understanding and cooperation that formal diplomatic or commercial interactions rarely achieve. These informal bridges between different communities contribute to Shanghai's development as a truly international city where diversity becomes a source of strength rather than division. The therapeutic applications that sophisticated users develop through careful experimentation with opium demonstrate the drug's potential for supporting rather than undermining human function and well-being when approached with appropriate knowledge and goals. The social innovations that emerge from the unique environment of opium dens provide models for addressing isolation, cultural displacement, and psychological distress that remain relevant for understanding how communities can support individual well-being in complex social environments. The artistic and intellectual achievements that opium-influenced consciousness makes possible challenge assumptions about pharmaceutical effects that emphasize only negative outcomes, while overlooking creative and cognitive benefits that appropriate usage can provide. The economic relationships that sustain opium establishments demonstrate how markets can develop to serve human needs that conventional institutions fail to address, creating alternative social spaces where different rules and expectations can emerge organically. The architectural and environmental innovations that optimize spaces for pharmaceutical consumption and social interaction represent creative responses to unique functional requirements that demonstrate human ingenuity in creating supportive environments. The documentation of these experiences provides valuable insights into historical periods when formal institutions failed to address significant human needs, forcing individuals to develop alternative solutions that often proved more effective than official approaches. The morning departure rituals that conclude each evening's activities create transitions that honor the significance of shared experiences while preparing individuals to resume their roles in conventional society. The careful management of these transitions reflects understanding that successful pharmaceutical treatment requires integration with ordinary life rather than escape from social responsibility. The patterns of return that bring patrons back to the establishment week after week demonstrate the effectiveness of the services provided, while highlighting the ongoing nature of the human needs that drive people to seek pharmaceutical assistance and social connection. The evolution of individual relationships with opium over time reveals how therapeutic usage can remain stable and beneficial for extended periods when approached with appropriate knowledge and support, challenging stereotypes about inevitable progression toward addiction and dysfunction. The community formation that occurs naturally within well-managed establishments demonstrates how shared vulnerability can create bonds of mutual support that strengthen rather than weaken individual resilience and social connection. The cultural preservation that occurs through cross-generational transmission of opium-related knowledge and practices ensures continuity of therapeutic traditions, while allowing for innovation and adaptation to changing circumstances. The morning cleaning and preparation activities that follow each evening sessions represent renewal and preparation for another cycle of human needs and pharmaceutical response. The staff's careful attention to every detail reflects understanding that the quality of service depends on maintaining environments that support both individual therapeutic goals and meaningful social interaction. The cyclical nature of these activities creates rhythms of renewal and restoration that serve essential functions for both patrons and staff who participate in creating and maintaining spaces where healing and human connection can occur naturally. Legacy of establishments like the Jade Garden extends beyond their immediate historical context to provide insights into human needs and social solutions that remain relevant for contemporary understanding of community healing and the role that altered consciousness can play in supporting individual and social well-being. As our journey through the opium dens of old Shanghai draws toward its natural conclusion, we carry with us not just images of smoke-filled chambers and reclining figures, but a deeper understanding of the complex human needs that drove people to seek refuge in these hidden spaces. The stories we have encountered reveal the creativity, resilience, and fundamental humanity of individuals navigating the challenges of a rapidly changing world where traditional sources of meaning and connection had been disrupted by forces beyond their control. The sweet smoke that curled through these chambers carried more than pharmaceutical effects. It bore the hopes, fears, dreams, and sorrows of people seeking temporary escape from circumstances that often seemed overwhelming. Yet in that seeking, they found not just relief, but connection, not just oblivion, but understanding, not just escape, but the strength to return and face another day in colonial Shanghai's demanding social environment. The gentle conversations that drifted through these spaces created temporary communities where strangers became confidants, where cultural barriers dissolved into shared humanity, and where the search for meaning found expression in the most unlikely circumstances. These were places where time moved differently, where the harsh edges of daily life softened into something more forgiving, and where the simple act of sharing space and breath created bonds that transcended the artificial divisions imposed by colonial society. The relationships forged within these walls demonstrate something profound about human nature that transcends historical circumstance. When the artificial constraints of social position and cultural expectation temporarily dissolve, what remains is the fundamental human capacity for empathy, understanding, and genuine connection. The Portuguese sailor and Chinese scholar, the British clerk and German doctor, the widowed merchant and struggling artist all found common ground in their shared vulnerability and mutual recognition of the burdens that life inevitably brings. These connections often proved more authentic and sustaining than the formal relationships that governed their daylight hours. Free from the performance requirements of their public roles, patrons could explore aspects of themselves that had no place in colonial society's rigid hierarchies. The opium provided not just pharmaceutical relief, but permission to be fully human in ways that ordinary social interaction rarely allowed. The establishment's success in fostering such relationships reflected careful attention to creating environments where trust could develop naturally. The soft lighting that obscured sharp distinctions between individuals, the comfortable furnishings that encouraged relaxed interaction, and the unhurried pace that opium naturally imposed all contributed to psychological conditions where authentic dialogue became possible. The staff understood that their role extended far beyond simple service provision to include subtle facilitation of the human connections that gave meaning to the pharmaceutical experience. Their discretion created safety, their attentiveness demonstrated care, and their cultural sensitivity enabled communication across the language and custom barriers that might otherwise prevent meaningful exchange. The economic structure that supported these establishments reflected broader patterns of supply and demand that characterized Shanghai's position as an international trading center. The opium itself arrived through networks that connected Indian poppy fields with Chinese consumers, British merchants with local distributors, and global commerce with individual human needs for relief and connection. The transformation of raw opium into refined preparations suitable for therapeutic use required specialized knowledge that master preparers guarded carefully while passing down through informal apprenticeships that preserved quality standards across generations. These artisans understood that their work involved more than simple pharmaceutical production. They were crafting substances that would influence human consciousness and social interaction in profound ways. The tools and techniques used in opium preparation reflected centuries of accumulated wisdom about how to optimize the drug's beneficial effects while minimizing potential dangers. The careful heating that vaporized active compounds without destroying them, the precise measurements that ensured consistent potency, and the quality assessments that distinguished superior preparations from inferior ones all demonstrated sophisticated understanding of pharmaceutical principles. The consumption rituals that patrons developed through experience represented personal adaptations of traditional practices to individual needs and circumstances. Each regular visitor evolved techniques for preparation, timing, and dosage that maximized therapeutic benefits while maintaining their ability to function effectively in ordinary social and professional contexts. The pipes themselves became personal artifacts that reflected both functional requirements and aesthetic preferences. The finest examples represented significant investments in equipment that would provide years of reliable service, while demonstrating the owner's appreciation for craftsmanship and quality. Many patrons developed emotional attachments to their pipes that transcended mere utility to encompass memories of meaningful experiences and important relationships. The social dynamics that emerged around pipe sharing and preparation created additional opportunities for bonding between patrons who might otherwise remain strangers. The act of preparing opium for another person required trust and intimacy that quickly dissolved barriers between individuals from different backgrounds and social positions. The conversations that developed during these preparation rituals often proved as significant as the pharmaceutical effects themselves. The slow, deliberate pace required by proper opium preparation created natural opportunities for the kind of unhurried dialogue that busy daily schedules rarely accommodated. The physical act of smoking created shared rhythms of breathing and contemplation that synchronized the experiences of individuals using the same chamber. This physiological coordination contributed to the development of temporary communities where individual consciousness merged into collective awareness of shared humanity and common needs. The medical knowledge that accumulated within these establishments often exceeded what formal healthcare providers could offer, particularly for conditions that conventional medicine poorly understood or inadequately treated. The empirical observations of experienced users and attentive staff created practical understanding of therapeutic applications that academic training rarely addressed. The documentation of individual responses to different preparations and consumption methods provided evidence for personalized treatment, approaches that recognized the unique needs and circumstances of each patron. This individualized attention contrasted sharply with the standardized approaches that characterized most contemporary medical practice. The safety protocols that evolved through experience with diverse clientele reflected sophisticated understanding of risk factors and intervention techniques that prevented most serious complications while preserving the autonomy and dignity that adult patients deserved. The staff learned to distinguish between therapeutic use and problematic consumption patterns while providing guidance that supported healthy relationships with pharmaceutical treatment. The establishment's relationship with local authorities required careful navigation of legal ambiguities that characterized opium regulation during this period. Official policies often contradicted practical realities, creating situations where discretion and relationship management became essential skills for successful operation. The cultural significance that opium consumption held within traditional Chinese society provided historical precedent and social acceptance that complicated efforts to impose foreign moral standards on local practices. The tension between traditional usage patterns and colonial regulatory efforts created complex negotiations that shaped how establishments operated and how patrons understood their activities. The international dimensions of Shanghai's opium trade reflected broader patterns of cultural exchange and economic integration that characterized the city's unique position as a meeting point between East and West. The presence of patrons from dozens of different countries created multicultural environments where global perspectives could emerge through shared pharmaceutical experiences. The artistic and literary traditions that developed around opium use provided cultural frameworks for understanding altered consciousness as a legitimate tool for creative exploration and spiritual development. These traditions influenced how sophisticated users approached their consumption and interpreted their experiences. The philosophical implications of opium's effects on consciousness raised questions about the nature of ordinary awareness and the possibility that pharmaceutical alteration might reveal rather than distort aspects of reality that normal consciousness obscured. These questions engaged patrons in discussions that explored fundamental issues about human nature and the meaning of authentic experience. The seasonal patterns that influenced patronage reflected both practical considerations and deeper rhythms of human need that connected pharmaceutical consumption with natural cycles of activity and rest. The establishment adapted its offerings to accommodate these variations while maintaining consistent quality and service standards. The daily rhythms within the establishment created predictable patterns of social interaction and pharmaceutical use that served different types of patrons at appropriate times. The careful orchestration of these schedules maximized utilization while ensuring that incompatible groups did not interfere with each other's experiences. The evening progression from initial arrival through pharmaceutical consumption to gradual departure followed natural patterns that honored both individual needs and collective social dynamics. The staff facilitated these transitions with subtle attention that enhanced rather than interrupted the organic flow of activities. The morning aftermath of evening sessions required careful attention to physical restoration and psychological integration that prepared patrons for a successful return to their ordinary responsibilities. The establishment provided resources and guidance that supported healthy transitions between altered and normal consciousness. The long-term relationships that developed between regular patrons and establishment staff often evolved into forms of extended family connection that provided stability and continuity in lives otherwise marked by displacement and uncertainty. These relationships demonstrated the human capacity to create meaningful bonds even in commercial contexts when mutual respect and genuine care inform interactions. The legacy of establishments like the Jade Garden extends beyond their specific historical context to illuminate enduring aspects of human nature and social organization that remain relevant for contemporary understanding. The creative solutions that patrons and staff developed for addressing isolation, cultural displacement, and psychological distress offer insights into how communities can support individual well-being in challenging circumstances. The cross-cultural understanding that emerged from shared pharmaceutical experiences demonstrates the potential for altered consciousness to facilitate communication and empathy across differences that normally create barriers to mutual appreciation and cooperation. These achievements suggest possibilities for addressing contemporary challenges related to cultural conflict and social fragmentation. The therapeutic applications that sophisticated users developed through careful experimentation provide evidence for pharmaceutical approaches to mental health and social integration that conventional medicine rarely explores. The success of these informal treatment methods challenges assumptions about the inevitability of addiction and dysfunction while highlighting the importance of setting, and social support in determining pharmaceutical outcomes. The architectural and environmental innovations that optimize spaces for both individual contemplation and social interaction offer models for designing contemporary environments that support human well-being and meaningful connection. The attention to lighting, acoustics, furnishing, and spatial arrangement demonstrates how physical environments can either support or undermine psychological and social goals. The economic relationships that sustain these establishments illustrate how markets can develop to serve human needs that conventional institutions fail to address. The success of these alternative social spaces suggests possibilities for creating contemporary institutions that prioritize human well-being over narrow commercial or regulatory objectives. The morning light that now streams through the windows of the Jade Garden illuminates empty chambers where profound human dramas once unfolded nightly. The silk cushions lie undisturbed, the carved screen stands silent, and the ornate pipes rest in their cases, waiting for users who will never return. Yet something essential persists in these spaces, the memory of human connection, the echo of meaningful conversation, and the lingering sweetness of smoke that once carried away the sorrows of a generation caught between worlds. The stories we have witnessed remind us that behind every historical moment lay individual human beings struggling with universal challenges of loneliness, suffering, and the search for authentic meaning. The solutions they discovered within these walls may seem foreign to contemporary sensibilities, yet their fundamental insights about human nature and the conditions necessary for healing and connection transcend historical circumstance. The gentle conversations that once drifted through these chambers carried wisdom about the importance of creating spaces where masks can be removed, where vulnerability is met with compassion rather than judgment, and where the simple act of sharing presence with fellow travelers on life's difficult journey can provide the strength needed to continue walking forward. As the morning sun climbs higher over Shanghai's bustling streets, the contrast between the peaceful chambers and the demanding world outside becomes ever more apparent. Yet those who found refuge here carried something precious back into that demanding world, the knowledge that they were not alone in their struggles, that understanding was possible across seemingly impossible differences, and that human connection could flourish even in the most unlikely circumstances. The opium dens of old Shanghai have long since vanished, their stories surviving only in fragments of memory and imagination. But the human needs they served persist, and the creative solutions their patrons and staff developed for addressing Those needs continue to offer insights into the enduring challenge of creating communities where healing and authentic human connection can flourish. The final wisps of sweet smoke fade into memory as we reach the end of our journey through these forgotten chambers. The red lantern that once guided seekers down narrow alleys has long since been extinguished, its gentle glow replaced by the harsh fluorescent lights of modern Shanghai's relentless progress. Yet, in these quiet moments before sleep claims us, we can still hear the echoes of those whispered conversations that once filled the Jade Garden's intimate spaces. The Portuguese sailor sharing tales of distant storms, the Chinese scholar finding solace in philosophical discourse with foreign strangers, the lonely clerk discovering friendship across cultural boundaries that seemed impossible to bridge. These weren't merely stories of vice or addiction, but profound human documents that reveal something essential about our capacity for connection in times of displacement and uncertainty. The opium provided temporary relief, yes, but what sustained these individuals week after week was something far more valuable: the recognition that their struggles were shared, their humanity acknowledged, their need for understanding met with gentle acceptance rather than harsh judgment. The attendant, Lao Wang, making his final rounds through chambers now empty of all but memory, understood something that history often forgets. These establishments served as sanctuaries, not just from physical pain, but from the deeper anguish of cultural isolation and spiritual displacement that defined colonial life for so many. As morning light filtered through carved wooden screens, for the last time, illuminating cushions that would soon be packed away forever, the true legacy of places like the Jade Garden became clear. They had provided spaces where the artificial barriers of race, class, and nationality could dissolve into a recognition of our common humanity, where the search for meaning could find expression in the most unexpected conversations, where strangers could become confidants through the simple act of sharing vulnerability and breath. The sweet smoke has dissipated, but conversations have faded to whispers, and the gentle community that once gathered in these chambers has scattered to history. But their stories remain, reminding us that even in the most challenging circumstances, human beings possess an extraordinary capacity to create connection, find healing, and discover hope in the company of fellow travelers on life's difficult journey. Now, as Shanghai's modern towers pierce the sky where opium dens once offered refuge, we close our eyes and let these stories carry us toward our own peaceful dreams, knowing that somewhere in the space between memory and imagination, the Jade Garden's doors remain forever open to those who seek not just pharmaceutical relief, but the deeper medicine of human understanding and compassionate presence. Sweet dreams, and may you find in sleep the same gentle peace that once graced these forgotten chambers of old Shanghai.